This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland one of the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 8-1, coming off a great team win over the Detroit Pistons. And you know, at this point, let's call it a historic win over LeBron James. First time since 2011, and we got a great podcast for you guys today. Joining me is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Baron Davis was hard carrying us in those times. It feels good, Justin. I'm feeling great. This team is, they are something special. I don't know any other way to say it. Yet again. They get punched in the mouth a little bit. Yet again, they fall behind just a little bit. And yet again, in the second half, they put on the clamps, Justin. The clamps.
You couldn't help yourself, could you? Coming off a historic one, we need to have a historic moment of our own. And that's welcoming back 92.3 The Fans. Anthony Lima, officially friend of the podcast, making his return. Tony, how you doing today, man?
I think you glossed over the fact that I believe if we're talking about the same game in 2011, do you know who the leading scorer was for the Cavaliers in that game?
Was it Alonzo G?
Good guess. No.
Was JJ still there? JJ Hickson, maybe?
He absolutely was. And he was 9 to 10 from the free throw line that night. And he had 21 points.
Yeah.
He was almost outdone by the pride of Bradley and Naperville, Illinois, that, of course, being Anthony Parker.
Oh, my goodness.
Little brother Candace, right?
Yeah, I loved Anthony Parker. I think he was a little before his time. I think Raptors era Anthony Parker would have been a great player on those LeBron teams, one of the, kind of those original 3-and-D wings. Just was the wrong moment for him to join
and
the
Cavs. And he came in right as the vibes were starting to collapse, Yeah. I feel like, he didn't get the fun of the 08 team,
Mm-hmm. Well,
he came in right as it started to look a little dire, and I think he probably wore the pressure from Cavs fans a little harder than most.
Well, I'm happy to bring in an Anthony that is currently in his prime onto the Chase Down podcast. Tony, how are you feeling after a big win over the Los Angeles Lakers?
Elephant in the room is not their record. The elephant in the room is, if my standings are accurate and up to date, is that the Cavaliers, and a statistical measure that I believe was popularized, if not pretty much immortalized before the Humongotron, just the normal scoreboard, the diff, which we normally only look at from game to game, but the season-long point differential for the Cavs, I believe, is now number 1 in the NBA. Move over, Milwaukee.
You know what? It's so amazing. Like we talked about this on the last podcast, but the fun thing about this winning streak, and today was another example of that, is it's not like they've just been cruising to all of these victories. They've gone down to some good teams. They've gone down to Boston twice. They've had games against Orlando where, it looks like you don't really have it. The first half was kind of a Rorschach test. I found, like, I was looking at the Twitter timeline and there was people saying, oh, this is a young team that's not ready for the big moments. There were people saying, Garland and Mitchell haven't had time together. So many people had an explanation what was happening on the first half, and frankly, like, I couldn't even put my finger on it. It looked like a typical afternoon game, but you're never quite sure. But once again, they came back, much better effort in the second half. They allowed 36 points in the first quarter, allowed 36 points in the second half, and came away with a big victory. I'm just impressed that a team this young is this level of resilient.
I think that is aptly put. To me, what has been the most impressive, yes, the comeback, without a doubt, against Boston the first time around. That was amazing. But, I have a bunch of friends from Boston from my time up in Syracuse, a lot of East Coast friends, and we're in these text threads constantly, and all they wanted to talk about was, well, we have our new coach. we're not really playing like the playoffs. And I'm like, well, nobody should be playing like the playoffs. Even though, when you go to the games at the Q right now, Rocket Mortgage, it feels like playoff atmosphere, especially in the second half of these games. But what impressed me the most was that second game, because I went on the radio and said, hey, Cavs are due for a loss now. They're probably going to lose a game at some point. It might be this game against the Celtics team that was humiliated with that comeback that they probably feel that they allowed. We in Cleveland feel like we took it. So I was fully ready for a Cavs close game, but maybe a loss. And the fact that not only did they not back down from those guys, and they don't back down from anybody. And I have a few moments from the first quarter of tonight's game against the Lakers I want to bring up in regard to that, because I felt like Darvin Ham, and he is their coach, right? Darvin.
Yes.
I feel like he had a few things in the old blueprint, the old textbook when it comes to old school NBA that he tried to do right away to maybe intimidate the Cavs, and they weren't going to do it. But I was blown away again that the second time around, they really looked like they were in the heads of the Celtics, and they got a good Celtics effort. It wasn't like the Celtics were going to mail it in. You knew that wasn't going to happen. And so that win was so much more rewarding to me than even the comeback win. So that to me is what you have so many indications. I know it might get old at some point if they have to give a halftime speech every game. If we have to give JB Bickerstaff, the jewelry, the bling after every game because of his halftime speeches, that's not something you want to live and die with in the playoffs. Hey, regular season, it's a long season, and you're not going to get full effort for 48 minutes every single night. But it's common refrain, right? We've had a bunch of these games. They've been a little listless. Defense has been gone. They had some foul trouble with their front court in the first quarter today that I think had something to do with that defensive effort. But again, second half, you said put the clamps down. They did that. It was incredible, the effort.
72 offensive rating for the Lakers in the second half. Just an absolutely atrocious effort offensively for the Lakers. The Cavs were forcing them into 0% chance of falling type of shots. The ones that the baseline shots that go flying out to the other 3-point arc, like just no chancers. In the second half of the season so far, they lead the league in defensive rating. They're allowing 98 points per 100 possessions in the second half. That is just bananas defense. I don't know if it's the speeches from JB. I don't know if it's a team that just takes a second to figure out what they're up against. I because I have felt like they have played appreciably different on defense in the second half of a lot of these marquee games. But man, are they just are so freaking poised, man. Like, I at no point did I think they were out of that game today, despite about as ugly of a first quarter as you can have while only finishing it losing by 6, because Donovan Mitchell just went absolutely ballistic.
Yeah, to me, part of what I'm thinking about with this team is it's obvious the starting lineup hasn't had a lot of time together, and we've already seen kind of different versions of the starting lineup, and the Cavs haven't got out to good starts, right? Like, that lineup hasn't been clicking yet, and really they've been carried by their bench. And one thing that jumps out to me, though, is outside of Donovan Mitchell, a lot of these guys have been here for a while now. And I think when you have continuity with the coaching staff, you're more able to make adjustments because they've been running these plays for a while. They know what type of adjustments they can make. They've had opportunities to practice. They have a full roster now, which they didn't have for the last half of last season. It just kind of feels like time together really helps you kind of know how to rally and who to lean on, and having those veterans come in off the bench, I think, makes a really big difference.
Man, Kevin calms them down so much. I feel like the game got under control the second JB checked him in. Like, I don't think they played awesome immediately, but they went from, I think they were spiraling a little bit. They looked a little rattled. They were making bad choices. And Kevin just came in and just evened out the tone. Like, sure, Russ still hit a couple threes. Sure, Wade was guarding him way too close up on the ball, and he was getting by him. Like, I think there were gripes, but, like, I think the tone of the game changed the second Love came in. And, like, how many games are we going to see where, the starters are all, +5, +6, and then Wade, Love, and Osman are all +20? Like, it feels like every other game this year.
Yeah.
I actually thought there was a chance that Russell Westbrook was going to start his MVP campaign after that first quarter.
I got a little nervous.
He actually enjoyed basketball again, and it seemed like the fans enjoyed him.
That was actually kind of nice.
I seriously half wondered if they were going to start him in the third quarter. And they got off to a terrible start in the third. And then he came out again. He made some nice plays, but he also did the stuff that I think their fans have grown accustomed to when it comes to him. I just was really interested. I teased a few of the early things that I saw right off the bat. Again, some ticky-tack fouls that mounted some foul trouble with your front court that changed everything defensively. And it really allowed the Lakers, once they started penetrating, getting inside, Anthony Davis got some easy buckets, some easy opportunities. The interminable first half, the free throws. I mean, both teams were just shooting free throws. Cavs still had the big edge, I think, by 11 at halftime, but it was way too many stoppages. And
all 11 of them were Donovan Mitchell.
You're right. And that was the thing, that you're only down 6 at the end of the first quarter. And you're feeling really good at that because you had withstood the barrage of Westbrook and how that fan base got united. They're desperate to cling on to anything then because they know that they're nothing, if they can't get anything while he's there. You're looking at the group of guys around LeBron, but a couple of things. They came right off the bat. There were some bully ball plays. They wanted to get physical with LeVert, and they wanted to get physical with Garland. And they did. Garland got knocked on his butt, I think, twice. And I'm not even talking – that was before he had actually gotten hit with the when Westbrook threw the ball forward. And, there was a big debate on whether or not that was going to be a common foul or not, or a flagrant. But he had already gone down with screens. Anthony Davis, I mean, that is a big – just say what you want about Anthony Davis. When you are a diminutive guard and you are running right into him. And I feel like there were a couple of plays. LeBron went right at LeVert early, like kind of like a get out of my way. And then Westbrook, when he came into the game, he was telling everybody how small LeVert was because he boxed him out and LeVert didn't have a good angle on it. And he ended up getting an and-one, whatever. Be that as it may, they responded. That did not bother them in the slightest. They came back from having that foul difficulty in the front court, and you just don't know every given night. That's how you know this team is deep. That one night it might be Dean Wade, and Dean Wade hasn't had a good offensive night now for 4 games since that Knicks game. But at least Wade's gonna come in with effort, and you saw it again today. He was pestering a few of the Lakers. You remember the one sequence that led to the run out and the Donovan Mitchell Euro step bucket. And I mean, that's the type of stuff that even if you aren't scoring when you are coming off the bench, it seems like the Cavs every night, if you're scouting them, you don't know who it's going to be. Is it going to be Chetty? Is it going to be, Kevin Love? Is he going to get those wide open looks especially from the right point, with Darius Garland is just creating open look after open look. And then you also know when he catches the ball, he can go high-low from the 3-point line to sometimes Mobley, sometimes Allen. I mean, it really doesn't matter. So they're getting great opportunities every night. And so this bench, outside of Kevin Love, I mean, fans from other markets, they might not know, but not only are you getting effort, but you're just getting enough scoring to where they don't need everybody in that starting lineup. They don't need, LeVert and Mitchell and Garland to go off. We haven't seen those guys play together all that much, but they haven't needed that.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask this because Cavs were 6th in offense going into the game. Not sure where they are now, but they hung, I think it was like 114 points per 100 possessions on the number 2 or number 3 defense in the league tonight.
Yeah, and 7th in offense now.
Yeah. And my question is, who on the Cavs, other than Donovan Mitchell, maybe is playing over their head on the offensive side of the ball? Because I can name you a lot more guys who are playing under what I would perceive their ceiling to be, which I think is pretty crazy.
I got one. I have one. No, you're exactly right. Because I took it the other way. Evan Mobley, this is so great right now that Evan Mobley is impacting games the way he is. When 5 years from now, it's going to be a completely different story from Mobley. Like, you're going to look back at these highlights and go, man, Mobley, that's not the player. That's not the guy dominating the NBA offensively. You could tell how young he was and maybe at times how timid he might be, even though maybe that's an unfair characterization. But, me and my buddies are watching Mobley every night. And we're like, do you understand what this is going to look like a few years from now, how different it's going to look? Because he's not even scratching the surface. He's not even there to scratching the surface. He's like halfway there.
And he's
right now.
And he's shooting, and he's got 15 points a game on 55% from the field right now, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's more efficient. It is. It's crazy efficient. But the videos that were getting passed around this summer in a lot of those gyms where he was looking like Giannis 2.0 or any version of KG or the mashup with Tim Duncan or Chris Bosh, all the guys that we've made him this assembly, this composite of all these different guys. That's going to come, and I love that he's not forcing it, and he doesn't need to force it. And if you notice, against the Celtics, especially that second game against Hauser, anytime Hauser came in, they went right at him, whether it was LeVert on the perimeter or whether it was Garland a couple times or when Mobley pinned him down a few times. Like, all right, now we'll go to Mobley. We don't need to run plays for him, but if we see a silly mismatch that we know he's going to get his patented little jump hook or just he's going to be able to square up and there's not much you can do about it. We already know what he's going to do on the defensive side, and you're seeing that every single night. But offensively, I mean, that is a guy that I expect him in 2 months to look like a different guy offensively than we see him now. They just don't need him to be that. And I thought maybe we might see a mini leap without Darius Garland in those games, and just Donovan Mitchell carried them to such an extent they didn't really need to.
Yeah, they really haven't, and I find it so interesting from a staggering standpoint. It looks like the times that those guys are going to be split up, it's going to be Mitchell and Allen and Garland and Mobley, and I'm really curious what that two-man game looks as they get more comfortable together. But it does feel like Mobley's taken a step forward on the defensive end, and you can tell he's a more fluid player now. I love that he put his shoulder into LeBron twice. Like, he was isolated on LeBron, and his decision-making was, okay, I'm going to try to back him down. I'm going to put my shoulder into him and take 2 turnaround jumpers there. Like that wouldn't be something that you see last year. And I think sometimes people look at the field goal attempts, but the thing that's really encouraging to me is Mobley gets a lot of touches now on offense. Like, he's involved in all of the sets. His passing is such a big part of what they do. He's still that outlet when teams try to trap. But Carter, to go back to your question of who's playing above their head, the only other guy that kind of jumps out to me right now is Darius Garland. And I can't get a read on Garland. Like
2.5 games.
Yeah, well, one, he's played 2.5 games, so that doesn't help. But it's hard to tell. Like, has Garland taken a bit of a step forward because he looks so assertive out there and he looks so dominant at times, or is this just a product of having Donovan Mitchell out there and defenses aren't able to guard him the way they were last season? Like, we're going to need more of a sample on this, but it's amazing what those guys do for each other.
Well, I guess what the reason I asked the question is, this team was like bottom 10 in offense last year. All of a sudden they're flirting with top 5, and I don't see any reason why it should stop. And that's a scary thing to say, and if that's the case, then I really do think, if we really do think this team is a 5-7 offense,
and we know they're a top 5 defense,
then we really need to start thinking about conference finals and beyond this season. Some teams are just ahead of schedule. Like, there's no they shouldn't be that far, but if the numbers and what our eye test is telling us is that they're further than we think, I do think it might be time to start thinking about it.
Well, and I brought this up on a previous pod, and Tony, I think you brought it up with Ken as well, where kind of made the comparison to the 2015 Warriors, where it's like, okay, like, we got this young core of guys, and it just kind of looks like they're ahead of schedule. And there's so many things that remind me of that team. Like, when you look at the 3-point rates of Garland and Mitchell, it's very similar to Steph and Clay. They kind of wear you down with how active they are on the offensive end, and you can tell teams after guarding them on that end, then going up against the defense, going up against what Allen and Mobley does, as they get sloppier and they get more tired, the Cavs turn that into 6 points the other way. It's pick six. Every single mistake you make, if you're a little slow on your pass, or the Cavs are jumping on passing lanes, like, they can really make you pay. And it's so fun because I'm trying to figure out exactly how to calibrate my expectations for this season. And at this point, it's almost like I'm reverting back to the early rebuild years where I'm like, it's almost process over results. Like, I just have such a high level of confidence that I'm interested in how they're going about getting the wins and trying to see the individual growth, because ultimately that's going to determine what their ceiling is. Where do you kind of have your expectations right now?
Yeah, the profile you laid out, and we've been really analyzing these models over the last. We've had enough data now. I mean, it's been 12 years, 11 years since when you brought up the Warriors from that, and that was the example we used on the radio. So it's been about we're getting close to a decade of the league kind of looking like this or transitioning into the way it looks now. And I do have a point about the whole super team thing that we were a slave to. I know it'll come up in a prompt about, the rebuilding of this team and how we were all kind of caught in a different era, a different world, why the league is looking so different right now, which is amazing to me. But the profile is there offensively, defensively. And what I'm paying attention to is how many different ways can you play, because you're going to be missing guys. I don't care who you are in this league. You're going to be missing guys for different portions of the year. You're not going to just have your team. You're not going to have your normal team. Unfortunately, last year we were robbed of the starting lineup of our dreams, throughout the whole process. And that culminates in them not even making the playoffs because of it. And that was a huge blow. And so we're left to wonder, what is a lot of this going to look like in the playoffs? But the good news is that when you are able to play a bunch of different ways, you can't just have another great sophisticated coach or front office kind of dictate something in a series so much so that you're out before you even know it, that you're eliminated before you even realize what just happened. Like last year, Rubio goes down, and I kept emphasizing this because I was so intrigued. They were 30th in pace once Rubio went down. This year, they haven't had their point guard much at all. They are, I think I checked before the podcast, I think they were 16th, right around there in pace. This is what I love, that I already know that this team can play different ways based on whatever their lineups are. And, we're going to fantasize about just how great this defense can continue to get if they stay healthy. But offensively, the fact that I know that not only is it going to be brutal to guard this team just from their initial action and whatever they're then trying to make happen for a second option, maybe on the other side, how quickly they move the ball, that they have two centers that are willing passers. Obviously, one in Mobley does it better than Allen, but they both can move the ball. Then once the shot goes up, you got to go get a rebound. And now you've got a guy like Donovan Mitchell who's active on the weak side, or their bench players who are active, or, of course, their big men. Or, you saw what happened when, the final 2 minutes of that game against the Celtics the second time around, they get a missed shot out of Darius Garland, and who runs in to go get that rebound? This is not an easy team to defend. That you're going to give up a good look to the Cavs. And then if they miss it, there is a good opportunity that the Cavs are going to be able to corral a rebound and really cause problems against some defenses that are just not. I mean, that's the Celtics. That's the Celtics who can switch 1-on-5. They can switch all 5 positions, and they're going to do that. And that normally makes things really hard on the offense. And yet the Cavs were able to use that against them. So I have a lot of confidence. The only thing you just don't know is what's it going to look like in the playoffs. It's the same question you'd have for any team, especially any team once they make a move. Like the Celtics, they might not look exactly the same way as they did last year. So every team is going to be fighting that. But that's the only issue. We were deprived of that last year. We don't know what Darius Garland's going to look like in the playoffs, but I have no reason to believe that he is not going to look like we see him now. I don't think he's going to back down. I don't think any of these guys are.
Here's the cool thing. It's not like this team is, hasn't had tastes of the playoffs at an individual level. Donovan Mitchell's made quite a few deep runs. Karis LeVert's been in the playoffs. Jared Allen's been in the playoffs. Kevin Love, he's been in the playoffs a couple times. Ricky Rubio is well seasoned. So I do think, while there are reasons to suggest that there might be a learning curve this year, and I'm not ruling it out.
I would expect one. But
sure.
There's been a learning curve at the start of the season, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose those games. It just might not be as frictionless as you expect.
Yeah.
Continue, Carter.
Yeah, I agree. But ultimately you have people who kind of know what's coming, and those are the kind of people who calm you down. We saw Kevin Love do it against the Nets in the play-in, and I ultimately just think we're at the point where, yes, process over results, but the number 60 keeps bouncing around my brain.
I mean, I still like my prediction of 52 to start the year. But when you get off to
I can't believe you still like that number. given how they're started.
I feel good about it now.
Well, you should feel good about them hitting that for sure.
I feel really good about hitting it, but you want to build this kind of buffer, right? Because if you are going to have injuries, the Lakers had a team-wide flu going around, right? Like, are we going to have a few guys miss for non-COVID illnesses in a couple days because of that? Like, you never know what the unexpected is going to bring, right? So I like building up that cushion, but you're right. Like, there's no reason for this team to not get better as the season goes along. Like, Jared Allen is going to look better as he gets more time.
Jared Allen is shooting 10% worse than he did last season. like that is so encouraging to me. Like, there are dudes who are playing below the level they played at last year on a team that is much better.
Yeah, I'm amazed. And after beating LeBron for the first time since 2011, it makes me reflective because it's so different than the last time he left, obviously. And now we're at a point where I think we can comfortably put the term rebuilding far behind us. Like, this is something completely different. Now the expectations are shifting to, okay, we're going to start winning. How far can we go? What adjustments need to be made both internally with the roster and all those sorts of things? But I want to take this opportunity, though, to kind of reflect on what's been most different this time versus the last time LeBron left. Anthony, what kind of jumps out to you as the biggest difference in your eyes?
Well, first of all, just absolutely nailing draft picks, having draft picks and nailing them. This is obviously the hard part of losing LeBron normally is that you're not going to have those draft picks immediately because by definition of having somebody like LeBron, you're going to be all in. I mean, that was even the motto on the t-shirts and outside of the building. You were all in, what does that mean? All right, you're not going to have your draft picks to be able to try, or your swings. We talk about this with the NFL now, and all the analytics people in the NFL understand this more than ever, is that you can't do anything without the swings. We don't normally think about the NBA in terms of as many swings because there are so many fewer players, at least philosophically, that can come in and have an impact. Although I start to argue over the last 5 years, it's starting to change in the NBA that players can come from anywhere and the scouting is a lot different than it used to be. But, when you nail a Darius Garland pick, and you might not even have known that you nailed that pick. I talked to somebody very, very high up with the Cavs that they were a little panicked about Darius when they first saw him. They liked, on the floor. But they were a little nervous there year two about whether or not this was the right pick. And now there's no debate. I mean, he has extinguished all of that. You give somebody time and they stay healthy, and then you get to see it. And not only is there proof of concept, but like it's validated. Like, he's an all-star as early as he was, played so few games in college. Like, it's there. We said a lot of same things about Kyrie. They weren't winning games with Kyrie, but it was there. You knew that was the right pick. You knew that he was good enough. We didn't know if he could be a number one on any team. And quite frankly, with Darius Garland, would you be comfortable with him as your number one to try to win a championship? Right now, it's probably too soon to tell, but probably not. But let's revisit that in 3 years. You never know. Fortunately, we won't have to worry about it, it looks like, with the composition of this team. I just think that even sometimes you can stumble into things ass backwards. Sorry for all the great people on YouTube watching this. You hire the wrong coach, which is what happened. They hired the wrong coach, and then they went completely the other way. They went completely to somebody with a completely different disposition. And sometimes, you know what? You get lucky. You get lucky that you're able to pivot and do it as seamlessly right away as they were able to do. I'm not talking about the year with Drew or anything like that. But the fact that they were able to course correct, that is huge. So your front office is going to make some mistakes. I don't care who you are. We could talk about the Warriors. They've made plenty of mistakes. Yeah. And nobody talks about those anymore because you got banners. You got banners everywhere, and you're raking in money. So you're never gonna talk about those things. But with the Cavs, they just the infectiousness of which is in that building, not just the way they play, but you can see a culture that has been built now that, it's not a culture of a superstar. It's not a culture of LeBron, which is what they were before. And that worked for them to some extent. They ended up winning a title. Even in his first go around, they when he was really young, they still were going to the Eastern Conference Finals. They went to the finals. Yeah, they didn't ultimately reach their goals, and there's 1,000 reasons why that happened. But they were winning. They had good things going on. The culture wasn't awful, but it wasn't this. And this is how you guard against having some sort of epic meltdown or something disintegrating. Like, this feels like it's going to be propped up for a while on something bigger. And we're all looking to steal from the San Antonio Spurs, how they were able to keep it going for 20 years. I don't know if this is going to last that long. This thing could collapse in 4 years, and who knows? That's just the NBA. Things change drastically in sports in a short amount of time. But it feels like you've got the backbone of something pretty special. I didn't feel like that in the past, prior rebuild. And the other thing is, like, Andre Drummond, they're trying, they're trying different things. And
they
some
took
of that,
hacks, right?
Yeah, you have to, because at some point, you could say all you want that you're not worried about your job security, but it is unfortunately inevitable that the more years you go without showing that proof of concept, I mean, you're going to lose your job. And just ask, the Philadelphia 76ers, just ask their coach, just ask their GM. I mean, that's just what happens. It doesn't matter if you feel like you have a great cohesive relationship and a great blueprint on paper. Those losses are hard. Those losses are hard day in and day out.
Yeah. It's absolutely a grind. And, they did hit their picks. But I also think, the hitting your picks, I would argue Kyrie was definitely a hit. Tristan, definitely a hit. I mean, a very, very helpful player. Maybe, maybe not exactly one from that pick in terms of the style of play, but they certainly, were able to hit on a couple big ones, just as the Cavs hit on a couple big ones. I think one of the major differences is winning on the margins, trading Dante Exum and like the 30th overall pick for Jared Allen, when you already have Andre Drummond, who at the time is considered a perfectly
really well.
fine starting center and was playing pretty well. Your team was doing okay. And you go do that. You find second round and undrafted talent like Jetty Osman and Dean Wade. And you develop a guy like Dean and give him reps and let him earn minutes. You stick through the highs and lows with Jetty, when I'm sure there was temptation during the lows to, move on, start giving those minutes elsewhere. And in fact, they did at times last season, but those guys have stuck around in there, and there's a reason those guys are helpful. It's also not bailing on Kevin Love. It's refusing to sell low when you have a guy.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah,
Carter, that is an interesting one, because I come from the land of sports talk. We get very harsh. Fans do not like when they start thinking about a guy who they think has a foot out the door. And not only did we think he had a foot out the door, I think he's been honest that he had a foot out the door.
He wanted the foot out the door. I think it's pretty clear.
And to see how remarkable that is, that whatever it is, I know this is a amorphous thing that we talk about culture. Whatever it is, it gets thrown around way too much in sports, and losing teams are desperate for it. Winning teams say that's the reason they've been able to build it. But whatever it is, to have Kevin Love be not only a contributor every night, but a factor in game planning. Other defenses have to factor in the problems that he is causing on a floor. I did not expect to see that at this stage of his career based on what it looked like a few years ago. I thought this guy had a chance to be out of the league. And that's even with the gift that he has to be able to shoot the ball.
Remember that Olympic run. And how
he didn't
ugly
look physically
it was.
able to play, right? Like I thought that was a wrap, and I tweeted at Matt Moore today. I was like, I didn't expect a Kevin Love resurgence to get me this emotional, but it actually is. And I don't know. I always expected to get like more cynical as I got older, and maybe the pandemic kind of has me now like going the other direction, where it's just like, you know what, it feels so nice to just have a feel good story and like to enjoy the situation that this is in. But what stands out to me that's most different, and I think both of you kind of touched on it, is the player having veterans around, like having Kevin Love, having Larry Nance, like understanding the importance of having voices in the locker room, I think made a really big difference. I think the player development has been a lot better, because Garland was a hit, but that wasn't an immediate hit. Like his first year coming off that meniscus tear was rough.
Worst player in the league. He said it himself.
The first half of his second season wasn't that good. It was only until the second half where he really started to come into his own. But that took time. Like Jared Allen has looked better, and like even looking at some guys that aren't here, like Lauri Markkanen, bringing him in as a reclamation project and kind of empowering him to play a different game, play on the perimeter a little more. We're going to have you attack in the basket. We're not going to have you just playing this drive and kick. We're going to ask a little more of you defensively. That seems to have unlocked something in his career, and he's had a resurgence himself. So I just feel like the player development has been so much stronger. And like you said, Anthony, like being willing to take hacks. Like they tried it with Kevin Porter Jr. And for me personally, that was probably the moment where I had the most doubt in this rebuild was, you gave up a big cost for Kevin Porter Jr. It didn't work out for off the court reasons. And they put their foot down and said, you know what? Yes, we don't have a track record of having a culture, but you know what? We're going to really prioritize what we want this locker room to be. And they moved him on to Houston. And at the time, like a lot of us felt he was the most talented prospect. But, drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is what we want our culture to be, and this is how we're going to enforce it. I think you just kind of have to start somewhere, right? And I think that really was a big kind of turning point when you look back at this rebuild of, eventually they were able to establish a culture, which now it's just so evident that that's what it is. It's just how unselfish everybody is, the way that they're willing to listen and be coachable. Karis LeVert has changed his game. It's just so evident that these guys are bought into what the organization is selling to them.
And it's almost getting to the point where some of my buddies around the country supporting other teams, now the Cavs are still lovable to them, but once the Cavs start knocking teams out and beating teams and, it starts to get decisive, like they're going to have their detractors. They're going to have people hate them. But right now,
just like the Grizzlies had last year, right?
Of course, it's a great example. And you're just starting to hear already. It's like, man, if the Cavs get a hold of this guy, they could unlock some things. If they get a hold of this guy, if they find a way, because now it's almost like, I don't want to say it's to the extent of the Warriors, but you remember there was a 3-4 year span where every player the Warriors picked up or drafted or even were rumored to get, it was like, my God,
we let them get Jordan Bell.
DeMarcus Cousins. Oh my, that's over. It's a wrap. Why even play the season? You're right. And the Jordan Bell thing, like you're starting to hear whispers like that because there is a confidence that they're doing something not only right in that building, but they're knocking all of these out of the park. And that is what has been so impressive. And to see Donovan Mitchell come here, not only seamlessly work in, and that's give him a lot of credit too, but that's not necessarily, it was one of the first questions. I wrote down a slew of questions when they got Donovan Mitchell, and I was thrilled. I didn't think it'd look like this. I didn't think it'd look like this quickly. But I had some questions about usage, about what that was going to look like, of course, defensively. And it seems like that's all already been answered. It hasn't been answered in the playoffs, but it feels like it's already been answered in the scope of the small sample size of games we've seen.
It's so comforting when the questions you have get answered so quickly. And you know what? It's so nice to be having this conversation on a platform that never leaves me with any questions. And that is thanks to our friends at Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. I mentioned it before that the Kevin Porter Jr. thing was the moment where I kind of had the most questions of, okay, I understand it, but I'm not sure if we're on the right track. At that point, Darius hadn't had his breakout. Anthony, what was the moment for you where you kind of had the most questions looking back now that we're in such a better place?
It was when Kevin Porter scored 50. And I thought, oh boy.
It was tied to him too.
This is going to be ugly. Well, I've missed on some recent Cavs drafts. There have been some guys I've missed, and I like Darius Garland.
Mobley was not my guy. I was vociferous about that. Boy, do I look stupid on that right now. And I mean, I know you have the receipts to back it up. And I'm sitting there now. I'm like, well, what if the Cavs would have had the second pick? What if they would have had the first pick? Who would they have taken? Because you just want to be right in an internet argument. But Mobley was clearly the guy. He should have gone one. I don't care, whatever. And Scotty Barnes, Rookie of the Year, congratulations to him. I'm sorry, nobody's taking Scotty Barnes over Evan Mobley. It's just not happening. I don't think anybody could legitimately say it to my face. But I liked Kevin Porter Jr. And so I was kind of devastated to see how it played out. But I had been hearing some things behind the scenes. And when that ended up happening, I'm telling people, I'm like, dude, we're only hearing about some stuff. For them to move on from him, it's 10 times worse. And as we found out almost immediately, it was 100 times worse with Kevin Porter Jr. And good for him for getting his contract. I think the Sexton Wars. The Sexton Wars, he's the type of player, and it's not his fault, but the profile of that player in a rebuild when it isn't knocked out of the park, but looks like it might have some potential, but you're wondering where the ceiling is and you're not winning games. That is where it divides the fan base. It's almost in unison with, I hate bringing up football. Not all of your fans, your viewers care about the Cleveland Browns, but it was what happened with Baker Mayfield. Like the analytics hated Baker Mayfield. Even when he went to the playoffs, they hated Baker Mayfield, but yet he was playing well and won a playoff game. And it's like, divides the fan base. These types of players in sports can divide a fan base because it's not automatic. It's like we can all see Darius Garland is a hit now. We can all see, like, you don't have to ask the question if Evan Mobley or Donovan Mitchell. Like, there's just no question. It's already been answered. All three of them. It's just now whether they can stay healthy. With guys like Colin Sexton in this league at their position, it is hard. It is hard because you can't. Guys that just get buckets really don't grow on trees. Sometimes we make it seem like they can. But then what do you do with it on a bad team? And it's really hard to evaluate those things on a bad team. Forget about right now we're asking questions. What can Darius Garland look like in the playoffs? We're asking if a player like Colin Sexton is even viable for a middle of the road team. And you got to get to middle of the road to even know that. So that's what's so tough. And again, none of it's his fault. And congratulations to Colin, who I was really hard on often and looking back, probably unfairly so. But he got paid. So, it worked out for him. He may not be where he wants to be right now, but he ends up
they're winning.
And they are
7-3.
I still don't know how long this is going to last, but I remember a Cavs team that started, you're too young, but started 15. And I think they were 15-7 was Adrunas Ilgauskas way back in the day. And that wasn't really built to last. And Chris Gatling was on that team and Clarence Weatherspoon. You'll have to look at that. Some of you youngsters will have to look it up, but you kind of knew it was sort of phony. So we'll see about the Jazz. But Sexton was where I was really worried because I was nervous with how outspoken the owner and the front office had been about this player, that I was like, man, if they over-evaluate this guy, if they overrate him, and sometimes that happens in front offices, that makes me really nervous. But in actuality, you never know what a team really feels like a player because, I mean, that's what I thought the Browns thought about Baker Mayfield, and they said goodbye. So you never truly know what they're thinking.
Yeah, and I was heartbroken that we didn't really get the chance to see Sexton because, and I know you were between the same sentiment. Like, I thought he was playing really good team basketball at the start of last year before he got hurt, and that was really the opportunity to get a bit of a proof of concept. But just like the Cavs were willing to move off of KPJ and Drummond despite the investments they made, and I think you have to give credit to Dan Gilbert in those spots too, where you paid a lot of second-round picks and cash to go get KPJ, and because it wasn't working out, we prioritize culture, prioritize the locker room, move on from that. Drummond, you get Jared Allen, wasn't working out, you buy him out. Like, not a lot of teams can do that when you've made an investment. Sometimes there's like the sunk cost fallacy in those spots. But the fact that, hey, we believe in Colin Sexton. He was one of the guys that really kind of jump-started the culture. He bought in, he adjusted his game to play off ball with Darius Garland. Then he adjusted his game again last season to play a little more defense and play off ball and be part of the team rather than the leading scorer and all that sort of thing. And they still moved on from that because there was the opportunity to go get a Donovan Mitchell, just like they moved on from Drummond to get Allen. So I think a lot of credit needs to go to the front office in those spots. But
we'll forever wonder, Justin, what it would have looked like.
Yeah.
What would it have looked like if the Mitchell thing doesn't go their way? If the Knicks don't end up signing RJ Barrett and end up making that move and he's in New York instead, like what does it look like with this team? How different does it look? I mean, I still think they're good. Mm-hmm. I still think they're good. It's not
I think they're very good, probably. Yeah. Like, especially with when you look at how Lowry's looking right now, like they probably would have been a really good team, but it's just so evident that Mitchell kind of takes them to another gear, and his ability to shoot at that volume with the playmaking. They took a bet that his defense was going to improve. Like all of that ended up making a big difference.
The above the rim finishing also, by the way. Oh my God. Like a true above the rim finisher. And when you're constantly exploding above the rim that high, you have such easier angles to finish over length. Like the Cavs were the floater or get blocked at the rim kings for 4 years. and just have a guy who can kind of like generate those angles that just other guys can't. It's so nice.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? This is a nice segue actually to something I wanted to get into, which is each of us giving our worst takes over the last couple of years since LeBron left. And I want to start off
25 minutes.
I actually want to start off with Donovan Mitchell because I was not the biggest Mitchell fan. Like I liked and respected his game, but the questions of, hey, he's only had one season with league average efficiency. Like he only really played defense his first couple of years in the league, and then it's kind of gone off a cliff. Like, hey, you look at their playoff losses and what Reggie Jackson did to him, what Jalen Brunson did to him. Like that was a big part of those losses. And automatically just seeing the level of buy-in, like he's a different guy than I even realized. Like the way that he's talked, the way that he's embraced the city, the way that his play has backed it up. I was just flat out wrong on Donovan Mitchell. And we had always talked about, okay, you only get the one shot to give up all of your future picks and put in all those chips to bring in a star. And I didn't think a shooting guard was going to be that guy.
Certainly not a smaller shooting guard.
And it looks like Donovan Mitchell is that guy. I was flat out wrong with that.
He's that guy, pal.
And my other take that did not age well from the rebuilding years was I advocated for an Andre Drummond extension. I liked what he was doing at the start of the season.
So wing and a miss.
I was flat out wrong on that. Although once Jared Allen came in, they brought in one of my favorite young centers in the league, and that has looked spectacular.
Yeah.
Carter, do you want to go?
I'm going to partially blame our friend and draft consigliere, Trevor Magnotti, for this one because he's the one who educated us on this. But Jarrett Culver over Darius Garland. I was so disappointed when we took Darius because I was in love with Jarrett Culver, who is barely in the league at this point, never has had the offensive game, never explosive.
We loved a playmaking wing.
Yeah.
And to our credit, we were expecting DeAndre Hunter on that night, and we recognized that Darius Garland was the best player available, but we just wanted, I wanted a playmaking wing, especially because I felt like Sexton wasn't a true point guard, so if he's a point forward, we're set. You're golden.
Yep.
That's a two-way point forward. That's exactly what you want.
Defensive star, we thought. Ugh. And boy, was that wrong in a billion ways. And a bonus point on that take is every time I said, maybe Darius Garland might just be DJ Augustine. Maybe that's his floor, and that's fine.
you know what? Maybe the Cavs traded so many first-round picks because they hate our draft analysis that much.
Yeah, well, like, no kidding.
Let's just remove that possibility from the mix.
We're right every now and again, but we're wrong a lot too. My other take is I was kind of apoplectic the night of the Lauri Markkanen trade. I think I held it together on the pod, but I loved Larry Nance, and Lowry was coming in with bad press, and I thought we were getting a guy who was going to be soft, duplicative at a position, because I have never wavered as one of the great late Kevin Love defenders throughout the time. I always thought this guy helped us play. I thought that was what was going to happen, and then when they started him at the 3, I was just as non-believing. I was like, this The defense is never going to work. They're going to get cooked in transition. And this dude worked hard, played like well above his head defensively, well above his historicals defensively, and was kind of a great glue guy. I think the way he played, like we talked to Tony Jones after the Mitchell trade, they're like, no, they like Lowry. He is not just a guy for them. He was a legitimate target for them as part of this deal. And I just think I couldn't have pegged the guy more wrong.
Yeah. I think we were both wrong. Like, I like Lowry, but I kind of liked him as a Kevin Love replacement. And then with Evan Mobley, I had questions about that. But yeah, he really worked out. All right, Tony, we showed us ours. You show us yours.
My internet is starting to get choppy. I think I'm going to have to, unfortunately, leave the segment. No. Which era do you want?
Of this rebuild. Of this rebuild.
I was going to say, I mean, I go back to Anthony Bennett, where I was convinced that Anthony Bennett was Grandmama 2.0. I did not know about the sleep apnea. I did not know his vision was apparently impaired. I did not know. Like, I missed it.
Even as a Canadian, I've told the story. Even as a Canadian, I hated the pick. I really wanted Otto Porter Jr. That was my guy at that point after Noel got hurt. But no, I was so mad. I remember I almost got into a fight at a Bomber game. I was like, you know what? There's
a video of draft night. I don't know, Justin, if you were in that video, but it was with like 8 or 9 members of Cavs Twitter.
I was not.
Of David Stern announcing the pick, and it's just everyone going, ah!
and it's funny,
an all-timer video.
And it's funny because you look at the draft boards, he was the next big after Noel, so it's like, okay, like you kind of understand where you're going with it. And
then that Orlando game in Summer League.
Oh, yeah, I was in at that point. I was in on Anthony Bennett at that point. But again, that was me watching no college and then forming really strong opinions about those guys going into the draft.
We had talked to his head coach at UNLV. And when I got done with the interview, and this is after I was excited because I actually went out and just said, they're going to take Anthony Bennett. I didn't know. I didn't have any inside info. People thought I did. And I end up being the one guy in the country that nails the pick. So now I've got to root for the guy, and I've got to talk about his virtues. And I mean, I'd watched his tape and all that, but I'd never talked to the kid or anything like that. After talking to his coach on the air, we go to commercial break. You know, we're whooping it up in the studio. We're going crazy about how he's going to change, the Cavaliers going forward. I listen to his coach, and, sometimes you can just read between the lines. And I'm a cynical bastard at times. And you can hear a coach, and I go to Ken during the commercial break, my co-host, Ken Carmen, and I go, that didn't make me feel good at all. and that's a coach saying positive things, but it wasn't good. All right.
You were right. You had a backdoor cover on that one because, again, when you make a mistake, because teams are going to make mistakes, you can always pivot. And he did change the Cavs because he was part of the Kevin Love trade, who is going to have his jersey retired. Backdoor cover, baby.
It worked out. Just like the Kyrie Irving trade, we kept extrapolating, down
that
the
trade
road.
tree looks fantastic right now, man. I will die for that trade tree.
How about a couple bad takes from the modern era?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's easy. Everybody knows it. I get crucified as well. I should. It's Mobley. And, I pour over these tapes. Like I am a college basketball junkie. It's kind of started to subside over the last few years, but I watched plenty of his games. This before, I even thought he was on the radar. I obviously knew he was well hyped and, watched his games. And I just kept thinking, is this at this stage of where the Cavs rebuild is, does it make sense to take a guy whose offensive game is gonna not I shouldn't say struggle, but is just going to be kind of limited to start out? And is that defense that you see in college, is that really going to translate to the next level with the speed, the athleticism, and all of that? And that's where I missed it the most. I mean, and I based it, sometimes you base it on the silliest of things. I watched him go up against Corey Kispert in a tournament game, and Kispert is just pulling out the stops. I mean, had the gadgets, had every play, and you know how that team was built when they went up against him. And I was just like, I don't know. He couldn't really get the best or dominate Corey Kispert. I don't want him. And looking back, probably not the smartest or soundest of reasoning, as Evan Mobley is like clearly going to be just a dominant defensive player. you mentioned the leap that he's already made. I mean, I didn't even know there was a leap that he could make that quick on defense because he was extraordinary last year defensively. But he's already made it. So I'm like, what is he going to look like defensively, 5 years from now when he's getting called? Well, he's already getting calls because he doesn't get called for any fouls for the most part until tonight because he's so smart on how he defends. He's so good with his verticality. He's so good with his hand usage. It's such a smart way that he defends that I think they're going to be teaching the kids and big men and anybody taller than 6'10", they're going to be teaching that and showing film of Evan Mobley for years.
Mm-hmm. He's unbelievable. Like the job he did on Russ even tonight, like he completely took away his ability to get to the rim. And you would think that's someone that puts his shoulder into guys and he just kind of overpowers players. And both he and Allen are all defensive level this year. Like I think Jared Allen doesn't get talked about enough in the equation with the Cavs. Like he's probably I don't know if you can name 5 better centers in the NBA right now. And while we all wait for the Evan Mobley development,
it's because he doesn't care. He doesn't have a signature, waving of the finger. He doesn't have any kind of an arsenal of smack talk on the floor. He doesn't go on social media to demand attention. And I don't think that's ever going to change with him. I don't think
just wants to play Pokemon.
It's incredible just getting a chance to talk to him All-Star Weekend last year. When he was asked point blank about his outfit on All-Star Friday, and he made headlines because he's like, I don't care. Like, why would I care about that? He just doesn't care.
He's just relaxed. And you know what? That's another kind of encouraging comparison because you never know what the future is going to hold. You never know what if players' expectations are going to change, if they want more, right? The disease of more is the saying there. But the other comparison with the Warriors, and I hate comparing us to the Warriors because it's the Warriors, but the personalities all seem to mesh. Like everyone fills a role within the court that doesn't step on one another's toes. And the same thing seems to be true off the court, which is just so damn encouraging. I'm curious what your number 2 is in terms of bad takes of the modern era.
Oh, man. Bad takes. You know what? I actually thought this is even, I don't know, this might be worse. I actually thought Beeline made a little bit of sense. I actually defended it. I went on the radio.
I liked
and defended
it too.
It.
On paper, because we don't know anything about coaching, like that is the one area Cardinal I don't really go too in depth in because you don't know how stuff's being allocated throughout a staff. You don't
what attitude the guy's going to have on the way in.
There's no real way to know, and I can defend you a little bit, but go on. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
And just he ends up having just a silly controversy that was probably avoidable. That might have been a confusing situation. Either way, it's unfortunate because I covered him. I've been to a Final Four that he was coaching at. Actually, he was terrific at West Virginia. I covered him in West Virginia. I was somebody that was around him, and I was like, you know what? They've tried a lot of things. A lot of things haven't worked. This is zigging while everybody else is zagging, I guess. And, they got ripped. I mean, the Cavs absolutely got ripped when they hired, John Beilein. I forgot how old he was when they brought him in, but somebody who just hadn't had the NBA. Like we always talk about, Calipari and these legendary or up and coming college coaches that go to the NBA. Patino obviously comes to mind. And this one, nobody saw coming. So the Cavs obviously got ripped for it. And
shout out to Dr. Claw in the chat, by the way, who said JB was part of that deal. So again, we got out of it scot-free.
Yeah.
Always pivot. In life, you always got to pivot.
And Beilein stepped down, right? Like the same situation. And I don't remember there were some national people that liked the hire as well. Like, hey, young team, get a college coach in there. Like, let's see what that can be. But obviously he recognized it as well. And that's the thing. Like, you don't know with coaches, right? Like even pardon me, I'm still getting over a cold here. Even JB coming in, like you have Memphis fans saying, well, he never plays young guys. Well, clearly that's not true. And we're still finding out more about JB Bickerstaff. And I just saw Ben Taylor had tweeted out a breakdown they did for NBA.com of the offense offensive creativity that JB's showing this year. Like, we're going to learn more about these coaches, and I think we treat them too frequently as static commodities, not people that can have good games, bad games, learn from experiences, grow, improve, have good and bad years. So, it's coaching is one of those really hard things, especially in the NBA where things look so fluid that you think guys are just kind of freelancing out there, and it really takes an understanding of what plays and sets look like to even recognize that they're occurring.
Absolutely. I think the Bayline thing, yeah, it was tough, but I think one thing that you can say for this Cavs team is when something has gone awry, they've cut bait when appropriate. They've cut bait on the right folks, and they've held on to the right folks. Again, like, it's not like they had a universal policy. Hey, this isn't going well, let's pull the ripcord. If that was the case, Kevin would be gone, and this team would be appreciably worse. So, I don't know how much if you gave Kobe Altman and JB and the executive leadership team true serum, would they say, we got lucky on that one, or like we had this master plan the whole time? I don't think we'll ever know. But like ultimately, like, they've done well enough. They've gotten lucky. They jumped to 3 and got Evan Mobley. They've been smart. They traded Dante Exum and a fringe first rounder for Jared Allen because the Rockets didn't want to have to pay him. And Kobe was smart enough and well liked enough to get in that deal. They hit on a draft pick of Darius Garland, despite some early bumps, and then they took everything else and packaged it up for a bona fide super duper star. And I feel like that's how they got here. They made enough right calls and didn't let their bad calls kill them.
Yeah.
Is the NBA Executive of the Year trophy, is it like the Claret Jug for the British Open? Are they already engraving it? Is it already started stenciling out Kobe Altman's name? Is it already finished?
It's hard to pick
like
someone else right now. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, Kobe and honestly, JB's probably going to be in that Coach of the Year mix if this continues. Like, this is the exact type of team and the exact type of overachieving and navigating the injuries.
Cut to it right now, Justin. How many All-Stars? How many are the Cavs getting?
3. And you know what? If I have to make a prediction, I actually think Evan misses it just because I think Jarrett's playing a little bit better. But,
wow.
Yeah, I think right now Jarrett's playing a little bit better. I think Evan's more than capable of narrowing that gap or overtaking him. But that's just a reflection of where the team is at right now.
I think it's 2. I think it's Darius and Donnie right now. Jarrett's numbers are a little worse. Evan's numbers aren't huge.
Yeah.
But I put out a list right when they made the Donovan Mitchell trade, and I said, look at the guards in the Eastern Conference. Murray had already been traded in. Ben Simmons was going to play. We can laugh at that now. Kyrie was going to be there. We can laugh about that now. But the list was loaded for guards in the Eastern Conference. And Donovan Mitchell, I mean, that one is a no-brainer.
Donnie and Darius are no-brainers to me.
Well, there you go, right? Because, I mean, Darius was an all-star last year, and they might have the best record in the Eastern Conference, or certainly top 2 or top 3. They have to be represented.
Mm-hmm. They really do. And you know what? Like, ultimately, I think they have 4 guys playing at kind of that level, and that's the most important thing, right? Like, it is a numbers game, and we'll see where the accolades come down, but this is just such an encouraging start, and I'm curious to see what the rest of this week looks like. Anthony, you've been so generous with your time, but before we get you out of here, is there any kind of parting thoughts or takes you want to get off your chest?
I wanted to say, because I wondered about in the ebb and the flow of the Eastern Conference, like who's going to drop out ahead of the Cavs. We've seen Philadelphia struggle, then they kind of found their footing. The Brooklyn Nets, I mean, come on. This is, I guess, predictable, but yet you still didn't know. Until you saw it, you didn't know what that was going to look like. And Kyrie was actually playing outstanding until he mailed it in his last game.
Yeah, but and the how was just so deeply disappointing, too.
I went on the radio and I said, guys, we can get all our outrage off our chest. I said, I really am. Like, I sound like a parent, which I finally am now after all these years.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed because Kyrie was my favorite. He was my favorite for different reasons. He was my favorite player, maybe one of my favorite athletes in Cleveland history. And to see it turn like this is just disappointing. Yeah. It really is. But I'm looking at these teams jockeying for position, And it really dawned on me how this era of the NBA is different than it's ever been. We will pick it up at another time, but how having Kyrie and Kevin Durant, two of the better players, or having LeBron James, who you saw tonight, can still play, can still, when he wants to, impose his will, and Anthony Davis, why that's not enough. 10 years ago, that is enough. That is enough. It is not close to enough right now in this day and age in the NBA to have to try to build a team with two superstars and say, all right, that's it. With all our other cap limitations, it's all we can do. Like, that is not close to getting it done in this NBA. The league has changed that dramatically in the last decade.
And to bring it all home, it's incredible that in such a short amount of time, with the standard of what it takes to win in the NBA being raised over the last few years, that the Cavs are at the top of that, where they've put together a young team that rises to that standard is incredible. And there's still so much room to grow. There's going to be, as we said, there's going to be mistakes moving forward the next couple of years, but this is a front office that's shown they can be malleable, that they can roll with the punches, they can be light on their feet, that if a mistake comes, they have the support from up top to go out and rectify that. This could not be a more exciting time, and this is damn near the most fun I've had as a Cavs fan. Like, this is just such a fun era, and thank you so much, Anthony, for coming on with us. Really appreciate it. I don't even have to tell our listeners to go listen 92.3 because I'm sure they all already do, but make sure you guys are if you're not. Big thanks to everyone tuning in on YouTube. Like, subscribe, click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.
Before you leave, gang, I have a little surprise. I'm going off script. 11 years ago, Justin, 11 years ago, the Cleveland Cavaliers beat LeBron James for the first time. Tonight was the second time. We're ending on the Alonzo G, Baron Davis, alley-oop as a special treat to the gang. Enjoy. Have a good night.